She hurls the unopened letter. It bounces off the mantel and skids, face down beneath the cracked frame of last summer's photo. Its slap makes the idle silence feel like glass. The old landline, forgotten on the bookcase, shrieks once. Everyone freezes as if the sound itself is asking why no one ever answered before. Maggie bends to retrieve the letter, palms cool against the paper, then slides it back onto the mantel beside the warped photograph. Her fingers pause only long enough to tap the space beside last summer's sunburned smiles. Then she turns to the sink, where the tea kettle has been whistling a polite, patient note for the past minute. Henry wipes his hands on a dish towel, facing the window. He doesn't stare at anything in particular, just traces the familiar line where the garden path turns toward the oak. The cat, fat and unconcerned, sprawls across the foot of the stairs, tail twitching with the measured rhythm of someone who believes afternoons are for sunbeams and naps. Downstairs, June is reshuffling a stack of mail, the same pile she's been sorting since the wallpaper started peeling last spring. A ribbon of dust rises and settles back into the corners of the room, an ordinary presence. The landline's shriek has faded, yet the silence that follows is filled again with the clink of porcelain and the occasional rustle of newspaper, a cadence the house has known for years. No one speaks at first, not because of the sound, but because they listen for the normal, the usual heartbeat of their day. Then Maggie sets the kettle down with a soft sigh, and the house remembers itself, moment by moment. Maya shoved the top drawer shut with her hip, the clatter of cutlery echoing harder than she wanted. The kitchen smelled of reheated soup and damp coats. She had been staring at the cracked photograph on the counter when Jonah stepped in, shoulders hunched against the hallway chill. He paused by the pantry, taking in the litter of cards and the open voicemail app on her phone. "You kept it," Jonah said without looking up. He started toward the table, and Maya lifted her chin, pushing a postcard aside to make room for her palm. The card had her brother's handwriting, slanted and hurried, the ink unsmudged even after months. She blinked once, then said, "You heard her voice at midnight, the one that kept us both from sleeping." The words landed in the room like a thrown stone. Jonah stopped near the fridge, fingers trailing along the magnetic poetry she'd never taken down. "I heard enough to know she wasn't reaching out for comfort," Jonah replied. He locked eyes with Maya. Tension tightened his jaw. She said he told her to stay away, to let silence do its work. That was the shock. He was asking for quiet when louder was the only thing that felt honest. Maya slammed her fist onto the counter. The cutlery rattled. "So we're supposed to keep pretending that silence is safe?" she barked. "I've been holding my breath like it's temporary, but every time I go to speak, the room fills with the same cold." Jonah stepped forward, slowing the rise of her voice. "I get that. It still hurts every time I hear her name," he said. "But if we pry open that wound in front of everyone, there's no closing it. I'm not saying we forget, but I'm not ready for everyone to grit their teeth through it again." Maya blew air through her nose, the anger draining into something like resignation. Jonah reached for the phone, thumb hovering over replay. "You want to listen again? We'll keep it between us, but then we stop. No town gossip, no more questions." Maya nodded once, a dog-eared motion, and when the message played, the room filled with the raspy, terrified edge of her sister's voice. The words landed, unwrapped, and the silence afterward was heavy. Maya let it settle, then slid the phone back toward Jonah. "I'm not pretending this is closure," she said, placing a hand flat on the table. "But if we ever tell anyone else, it won't be tonight." Jonah exhaled, fingers tightening around the phone before letting it rest on his leg. The shock hadn't gone anywhere, but the tension loosened enough for them to breathe. Maya stood, lifting the postcard and sliding it back into the drawer, with only the top edge showing. It was still there, still sharp, but hidden again for now. The door remained shut, but the decision to keep the conversation from spreading created a thin, temporary calm. They had not found peace, but they had agreed on what not to do. And that narrow agreement was a small payoff, enough to move forward without pretending everyone shared the same version of closure. Jonah thumbed the rewind button twice, the thin speaker of his phone rattling with Leah's clipped breath. Maya leaned over the counter, forehead against the formica, and followed the cadence until the message ended with, "You have to let me go." When the ringtone cut off, Jonah slid the screen face down, fingertips lingering on the glass like it might flare up again. The bell at the side door chimed without warning. Maya's shoulders stiffened. Jonah jammed the phone under the pile of mail. Their mother appeared, winter coat still damp from the rain, her eyes flicking to the counter and then to the silence between them. "Did you two hear from Leah?" she asked, stepping closer. Her hand rested on a jar of utensils, knuckles whitening. Maya opened her mouth, closed it, and reached instead for a mug. Jonah set the mug on the counter with a sharp clink that pulled a glance from their mother. "She left a voicemail," Maya said, head lowered. We weren't going to bother you." Their mother's jaw clenched. "Why bother me then?" she snapped, the sharpness in her tone seeming rehearsed, as if it cut the rest of the sentence off. Jonah stepped between Maya and the doorway, hands slightly raised. "We're working through it ourselves," he said. "Keep it just between us for now." "You always work through it yourselves," she replied, eyes darting toward the phone. "Are you keeping secrets from me again?" "You know how Leah wanted things," Maya said, and the words rattled out before she could soften them. "She said to stay away. She said to let her disappear." She watched her mother's expression twist, and then she closed her mouth. There would be no asking for more when the air had already gone cold. Their mother collected her keys, pulled up her sleeves, and stood with them a heartbeat longer. "Then don't drag me into silence I didn't agree to," she muttered, the crease beside her nose deepening. "I have work to do." She left with the door thudding shut behind her. The sound cracked open the room. Maya dropped onto a chair, hands buried in her hair. Jonah set his palm against the counter, fingers splayed, and his shoulders sagged. The house held its breath for a few beats. Maya wiped her face with the heel of her hand and pointed toward the attic door. "We should take that box down," she said, "the one with the calendars." Jonah nodded. "If we're going to track how long the silence has been building, we should have a map," he said, already moving toward the pull string. They hauled down a dust-covered box, blew away the grit, and opened it atop the kitchen table. Old calendars spilled out. Red circles on the last day Leah visited, a cascade of empty squares afterward. Jonah grabbed a pencil, underlined the date Leah left, and then folded in the corner of the next month. The phone buzzed on the counter, Papa's number. Jonah thumbed it and let it roll into voicemail. Maya clenched her jaw. "Tell him you're okay," Jonah said without looking up. "Tell him you can't talk about it." She pressed her lips together, picked up the phone and said, "Everything's fine, Papa. We just need some quiet right now." The words slid out flat. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop to steady it. They penciled another line into the calendar box, a series of dates marked with parenthetical notes. "No mention. Mom left room." Voicemail replayed. Each stroke was a small concession of fact. The avoidance was real. It was constant. And it was somehow safer than the confrontation that always seemed to end with slammed doors. Jonah slid the booklet into the empty space beside the voicemail file. "We keep this," he said, tapping the pencil marks. "Not to hide it, but to prove we're not pretending it isn't there." Maya nodded once. "We keep Leah's silence between us and the pages," she said. "No one else needs to hear this today." She stood, tugged the box toward the shelf, and then added a strip of painter's tape along the lid. Jonah wrote today's date on it, the handwriting shaky but steady. "So we remember how long we let silence stretch," he said, and the two of them set the lid back in place. They didn't call anyone else. They didn't open the voicemail again. They sat with the boxed calendars and the unresolved ring of their father's voice message, balanced between the weight of Leah's abrupt departure and the quiet that had grown around it. The small notebook on the counter captured the decisions they were making now: avoid, record, wait. And the space between the lines held the tension that would only loosen in future scenes. For now, the room breathed again. But the hush remained a promise that avoidance would stay the default until something provoked it. Something louder than a voicemail and a slammed door. The kitchen light hummed overhead, while Jonah leaned against the counter, arms folded tight around himself. The voicemail thread still open on his phone screen. Maya tugged the lid off a tea tin, sending a puff of chamomile scent into the room, and set a calendar page face down on the table beside the box of maps. "We can't keep pretending it's enough to tuck it in there," she said, fingers pressing hard enough to crease the paper. Jonah's eyes flicked to the tiny square of paper. "So, what's the plan then? Drop everything on Dad with nothing to back it up?" He snapped, breath sharp. "Not nothing," Maya shot back, pinching the page between thumb and index finger. "We have the voicemail. The guy who told her to disappear, the 12 dates we've tracked. It's more than nothing. It's getting louder every time we shrug." She slid the page into the box harder than necessary. He pushed off the counter, phone gripped at his side. "We agreed this stays between us. You said we'd wait, remember?" The words collided with the memory of his own promise. But the clenched jaw betrayed the tension. He stared at the wall clock, the second hand ticking just beyond the mark where silence had become unbearable. Maya leaned across the table until her shoulder bumped his. Waiting for what? Another voicemail that says the same thing softer. The tea kettle hissed, steam rising in a thin spiral. "I am not letting another day pass where he thinks we let her go without asking." "She didn't leave because she wanted to," Jonah said, voice low, vibrating. His fingers twitched near the phone, thumb hovering over the button that would show the message again. "She was pushed. That's truth. But the rest, why, how much, still hazy. We can't just raise it with Dad like we've solved it. He'll see the gaps and pull back harder." A silence, thick as the steam now curling toward the ceiling, stretched. Maya reached down, slid a fresh sticky note onto the table, and wrote, "Call Dad. Tell him we know." Her hand shook. "We don't have to have every reason spelled out. We just have to stop letting the silence beat us up," she said, voice raw. Jonah read the note once, then twice. "He'll demand we drop it if we can't give him a straight story," he murmured. But he didn't move to erase it. Instead, he took the calendar page from the box, flipping it to the next blank day, and wrote the same words. "We'll give him the truth we do have," he said, and the syllables landed heavier than the air around them. Maya set the kettle back on the burner, letting the handle click into place. "Let him hear us fight for her," she said. And though her hands clenched the edge of the counter, her shoulders relaxed a fraction. Jonah nodded, jaw loosening. He leaned toward the calendar, fingers tracing the dates they'd marked, and then reached out, placing his palm on hers for a second, the first contact that didn't burn. They left the room together after that. The sticky note stuck to the countertop. A small, sharp promise. Claire's voicemail sat waiting, an answer still out of reach. But the move toward it had been made. They couldn't hide from the past any longer. And saying so, aloud, had already loosened some of the pressure. As Maya opened the apartment door, she said, "We call him tonight. No scripts. Just us, what we know." Jonah clicked the door shut behind them, shoulders squared, and met her gaze with something like resolve. The silence that had once filled the hallway now had to make room for their words. Maya balanced the phone between her shoulder and ear, while gluing a new index card to the plastic sleeve they were using for the silence log. Jonah slid the voicemail transcript toward her across the counter, 2 pens waiting in case his father asked for dates. "He's on speaker so we can both hear," Maya said, pressing the call button with a thumb that wouldn't stop trembling, then exhaling as the line clicked to life. Jonah cleared his throat when the call connected, finding the rhythm of their shared restraint. "Dad?" he said, and the word dropped into the kitchen like a stone hitting still water. Their father replied with a short, sharp hello, then added, "Maya, Jonah, I heard you say you were going to do this tonight, so I'm already writing the truth down. Sarah isn't coming back. I told Aunt Megan that over the phone today. She asked where you both were, and I couldn't keep pretending she was just away. I named her absence, because every time you two weren't there to answer, she kept asking, and I couldn't tell her to shut up about it." Maya gripped the counter harder, the sticky note demand blurred under her fingers. "We didn't want to stir anything up without knowing what was true," she cut in, voice sharp. "But she deserves to hear what we have." Jonah added, pressing the voicemail printout so hard it creased, "We have the midnight message, Dad. She was told to stay away. That's what we're calling about." There was a pause on the other end, the kind that takes up a dozen heartbeats. "I know," their father said finally, tone rough. "I heard it before you two did, and I should have told you. I kept it quiet because I didn't want Megan to fall apart." But the silence kept getting louder. "Since you're the ones who heard the message too, I'm done pretending nothing happened. I'll tell her what you said, and if she presses me for details, I'll tell her everything. No more not answering." Jonah let out a breath that could have been a laugh or a sob. Maya leaned forward, pressing the calendar card down so it wouldn't shift. "Then tell her. Not that we want her to go through this alone," she said. "But we're done keeping ourselves quiet because someone else chose it first." Their father didn't disagree. He confirmed he'd set a time the next afternoon to speak with Megan, adding, "Tell me exactly what you'll say so I don't misrepresent it." The small relief hit like a door unlocking. Someone else now had to carry the truth forward, and Maya and Jonah had already begun it. Jonah set the recorder down on Aunt Megan's coffee table, the casing rattling against the rim when Maya slid the binder beside it. The afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, striping the low sofa where their father sat with his hands pressed together, thumbs tapping a rhythm that matched the beat of the voicemail still alive in Jonah's phone. Aunt Megan waited on the other end of the couch, fingers twisting the edge of her cardigan. "I'll play it," their father said, voice low. He thumbed the device, and the room filled with Sarah's tone. Short, sharp, the command she had been given to stay away. Maya leaned forward, pencil ready over the calendar page where she had written the dates of silence. Jonah kept his eyes on Aunt Megan, watching how her shoulders stiffened with every word that named what they had been avoiding. When the message stopped, Aunt Megan sat back hard enough to make the cushion gasp. She didn't look at them. "I should have stopped it sooner," she said, jaw working. You all were right there, and I told myself not to interfere. Her fingers opened and closed around the cardigan hem. I let Sarah leave without saying more than a goodbye. Because you were afraid of making it worse. Their father cut in, voice tight. He reached for the calendar page, tracing the inked line where Saturday had turned into silence. And in that fear, you let the rest of us believe the absence was normal. I'll tell them why I stayed quiet, but I won't hide it anymore. Their father exhaled, shoulders loosening a fraction. And we keep tracking what comes after, he said, nodding toward the binder. The notes stay visible, the dates stay marked. No more buried calendars. Maya flipped the binder open to the newest entry, sliding the sticky note demand back on top so it faced them all. We start with you, she said. Then we go to the rest. Silence only lets the distance grow. Aunt Megan reached out, setting her hand on the calendar page. Her thumb rubbed the ink spot where Sarah's voice had ended. I'll say her name tonight, she whispered, the words quiet but steady. And I'll ask the family to say it too. The tape recorder's small LED pulsed through the low hum of the room, a reminder that the evidence wasn't going anywhere. The regret in Aunt Megan's voice shifted something. The silence that had once been a wall now felt like a door they could finally open together. Megan leaned against the kitchen counter, phone pressed between shoulder and cheek, as Dad paced the living room with a legal pad clutched in both hands. Maya was scribbling on the margin of the grief calendar, crossing out avoidance and replacing it with naming Sarah. Jonah nudged a chair closer and opened his laptop to a fresh document labeled Intentional Conversations. Eli, you need to hear this from us, Megan said into the receiver, eyes glancing at the others, then back down. Sarah's voicemail came through. We've been letting that silence grow. We're not doing that anymore. Her voice wavered when she added, We want you there tonight when we say her name, out loud, all of us together. Dad stopped pacing, shoulders tugging in one long breath. Tell them we're calling for a 30-minute window, he whispered to Jonah, then straightened. Tell them the whole family, no editing the truth. Megan's fingers tightened around the phone. Elijah, Maya's on the line too. She wants to read the words Sarah left us. Maya lifted her head, already shaping them on the page, and began. Sarah said she was told to stay away. We can't pretend that didn't happen. A deep intake, a crack of silence. Then the distant voice. Elijah, the cousin, answered. One syllable at first, then louder. I'll be there, he said, the hubris drained. My wife. She thought the silence was protecting us. Protection ended the day we stopped saying her name, Jonas said, tucking the document under his arm. We're starting a regular call, Sunday nights. No excuses. We'll each bring what we learned, what we remember, and what still hurts. Megan slid the phone back into her palm. I'm going to ring Aunt Lila and Mom and the others while you go through that list, she told Dad, pointing at the legal pad where he'd written intentional conversations twice a week with names. We'll set a time for the whole family to listen to the voicemail again. We'll let Sarah's absence be part of the room. Dad nodded, shoulders easing. Saints knows the silence didn't help, he muttered, the pad now front of him like a shield. He dialed, breathing in, then out. We're calling right now, he said, hitting the speed dial for Lila. We're going to talk openly, no more hiding. Tonight, everyone. Let's start with Sarah's name first. The phone buzzed, the plan moving from promise into motion. Jonah stood to pull the calendar box closer, ready to slot in the next entry. Sunday intentional call, 7 p.m. Includes Sarah. Maya laid her pen down with a small exhale, the paper filling with purpose instead of confusion. The room held a pulse, tense, honest, forward, just as they'd vowed. They gathered on the Sunday call as the sky outside smudged from late gold to indigo. The voicemail glowed from the screen, a record spinning truth into the quiet room. The voice of Sarah naming silence as walls. Maya's breath caught. Jonah's fingers drummed on the table. Megan's throat worked around the regret she had carried. When their father spoke, his voice cracked like old paint surrendering to weather. Yet he kept the name steady. They each listened again, not to dwell, but to anchor. Sarah on that tape, the sticky note demand still glowing on the counter, the record spread like vows across the table. The call did not fix anything. The wound was raw and widening. But they would no longer pretend the ache was absent. Silence had only made it grow, so now they moved together toward it, the intentional conversation already burning the night with purpose.